Okay, we are on day 3 of the rise of mass democracy. And we are going to look at the election of 1832. Here comes Henry Clay again. So remember he ran, this is the third time I believe that he is running for president. So he is the National Republican, which is the Whig Party, versus Andrew Jackson, the Democrat. Clay supporters are mainly New England. Even though he is from Kentucky, he kind of allied himself with John Quincy Adams, and so those are the folks that are going to be backing him. Jackson's supporter is everybody else. So even though Jackson's made a few enemies and kind of put his foot down with South Carolina and so forth, he is still seen as the common man president. He is going to thwomp Clay 219 to 49 in the Electoral College. He still had the support of the masses. This is what it's going to look like. You're going to have a do away with the caucuses. They're going to have the first third party that was a viable third party, although it's not going to get any electoral votes. They are going to introduce what they call a platform, and they are going to basically say this is what we stand for, and they're going to be attractive to some of these more religious groups, much like we're seeing today. So they are going to adopt these formal platforms, and this is going to be picked up by the other parties. This is what it looks like. There was an independent named Floyd who took South Carolina. Remember, they're kind of angry at Andrew Jackson, but they did not vote for Clay. They don't like Clay even more. Clay took his home state of Kentucky and the few states that John Quincy Adams had taken before. But you can see that this was very, very much an election for Jackson. Okay. All right. So Jacksonian democracy. Now, does democracy define? We'll answer that question. You want to think about how democratic was Andrew Jackson. So basically, he's wanting to get out of the Bank of the United States. This is going to become a very big deal. If you recall, Bank of the United States is part of Henry Clay's American plan, and Bank of the United States, again, it was structured 20% was government, 80% was private interest, and Jackson felt like that 80% was the aristocracy, that it was being run for the super rich people rather than for the common man. Now, Clay is worried about the Bank of the United States, and he's wanting to make this a big issue. He's kind of thinking that he's going to force Andrew Jackson to renew the charter, and his thinking is, and we're going to watch an Ed puzzle on this, that this strategy would work and kind of back Jackson into a corner. Jackson says the bank is trying to kill me, but I will kill it. So Clay's plan is going to backfire, and Jackson is going to set out to destroy the Bank of the United States. Okay, he vetoes the charter, and he said that he didn't care what the Marshall Court said. He saw the Bank of the United States as being a monopoly and unconstitutional. He goes head to head with Nicholas Biddle, who was the president of the bank. And Biddle, instead of negotiating and trying to work around it, felt like he could outsmart Jackson, and that's going to backfire on him. So Jackson, remember, Marshall Court had said that the bank was constitutional in McCulloch versus Maryland, when they said that a state could not tax a federal institution, that who's your daddy deal in McCulloch versus Maryland. But part of that decision was that it was constitutional, and Jackson didn't care. He basically, again, is appealing to the masses and saying that this bank is not for you guys. And what we're going to do is we're going to fix it, and he is going to pull federal funds. Senate says you can't do that. You can't go around it, and they censure Jackson, but Jackson, again, very hard-headed, and he is going to do. So this is showing Jackson, and Jackson is boxing with the head of the Bank of the United States, Nicholas Bickle. Webster and Clay are urging Biddle on, and Van Buren is in Jackson's corner, and Van Buren's the little dude back there with the bald dude. You can see there's a woman holding a thing of port, and that was kind of an aristocratic beverage, where the whiskey is the beverage of the common man, and you can see that in the foreground there of this political cartoon. Okay, this is Jackson again fighting the bank, and he's calling it the Hydra, that many-headed monster that is the bank, with all these aristocrats' names on this, and Jackson fighting for the common man. This is another one showing Jackson fighting the monster that he calls the Bank of the United States. So you can see there was a lot of political infighting, controversy. So there's the American system with, again, the Bank of the United States, the tariffs, and Clay. And of course, remember, internal improvements was not passed. He lost that one again, and he's going to lose another one that we're going to talk about. So this is again another pro-Whig cartoon during the 1832 election, trying to save the bank, but you see Jackson here with his stick, his veto stick, and Van Buren holding onto the tail of the horse. So this is kind of got a lot of symbolism. Okay, so this is what Jackson's going to do. He's going to pull those federal deposits. Remember, 20% of the bank was federal, and he is going to move federal money to what he called, well, to state banks, but they were his pet banks. And he makes a guy named Roger Taney the Secretary of the Treasury, and Taney is going to oversee this. And this is basically going to effectively kill the national bank. The bank is going to run out of funds, and without, having to, Jackson is able to go against Biddle, and Biddle has no recourse. He doesn't have the federal funds to effectively run the bank. So this is kind of showing how Jackson is removing the money, and how these bankers are scrambling because he is toppling the Bank of the United States. Okay, in the background here, the doctor's puzzled, or the desperate case of Mother versus U.S. Bank. So this is in the foreground, Clay, Webster, and Calhoun, and the bank is throwing up the deposits. Biddle's trying to console the bank, and Jackson is laughing, because if you see him at the far left in the window there, he is laughing. He is destroying the Bank of America. They passed something called the Specie Circular, and basically what that meant is you could not, if you wanted to buy land, you had to pay in silver or gold. And this is really going to hurt the farmers in the West. There had been banknotes made by various state banks, and they said that this is not going to work. So, and he thought it would bolster the economy. It's going to actually hurt farmers in the West and people who are trying to purchase land. Inflation's going to lead, and this is going to lead up to our first major depression in the United States, called the Panic of the. Okay, so again, these are incorporation laws that are going to come into effect under Jackson, and this is again part of, and we're gonna see a little Ed puzzle that hopefully will explain it a little bit better. Business owners now are not, because most businesses have been single ownerships or partners, and they had a liability. Now they're going to pass things that'll make corporations and limited liability for the people who actually own them. this is good and bad because this actually is going to lead up to things that we'll talk about with the robber barons later, Standard Oil, U.S. Steel, so forth, the creation of monopolies. A couple of really interesting decisions are going to be made. This is in 1837, and remember Secretary of the Treasury Taney? Well, kind of as a reward, Jackson appoints him to be the Supreme Court Justice. And he's going to oversee a case called the Charles River Bridge decision. And basically, this is going in Boston, across the Charles River. There's only one bridge, and they charge a toll. So they've built this bridge in 1780. And then in 1828, a new company was given a charter, and they wanted to build another bridge. So they said, they sued. They said, wait a minute, we were given this charter, and we've been charging this toll, and this is going to take money out of our pockets, and this is a violation of the. So this shows where the two bridges, the Charles River Bridge and then this new bridge, was to be constructed, and you can see, not too far from one another, and a lot of traffic was going back and forth over these bridges. So Taney, pretty guy, isn't he? And Jackson, okay, he is going to rule in favor of Warren. So this is kind of changing that contract idea, and basically it's saying, hey, you can't have a monopoly. This is actually going to encourage economic development, and you've got they ruled that even though the original charter was for the one bridge, this is kind of a change from the Marshall Court that another bridge could be built, and so this opens up competition. Jackson, remember, this is Clay again, and Clay proposes a funding in Congress to build roads and spend federal money on intrastate improvements, roads and canals, and Jackson is going to veto it. So remember, this is a continuation. He says, nope, if you're in Kentucky, you can spend your own money for internal improvements. And this is really going to aggravate Clay because he sees this as so necessary to the expansion of the United States. Basically, the tribes that were east of the Mississippi are now surrounded by white settlements. Jackson is kind of, he's been an Indian fighter, although he had Cherokee as allies when he fought the Creeks. He is not viewing these Native Americans as separate nations as the federal treaty. So as you read, they decided to open up the Oklahoma Territory, and that the 5 civilized tribes, the Cherokee, Creek, Choctaw, Chickasaw, and Seminoles, remember 4 C's and an S, were to be moved back over for their own good, for their own welfare. And he basically said, but if you want to remain, then you'll have your own plots of land, and you'll have to be like white people. You'll have to adapt to white ways. Over 100,000 American Indians were forcibly uprooted and moved. The Indian Territory in Oklahoma was promised to them permanently. That's going to change too. And we land hunter settlers continue to push westward. So most of these tribes are going to lose most of their land by the late 1800s. They are going to establish a new department called the Bureau of Indian Affairs, and they basically were supposed to see to the well-being of Native Americans. The Cherokee are going to actually adapt. They have an alphabet. They actually had newspapers. They had textbooks, and Sequoya created this Cherokee alphabet. They had a constitution. They had basically, they were farmers in an agricultural-based society, but they had on very good land in Georgia and not necessarily accepted by the whole of white society and the people wanting to move in. And then they found gold, and that was even worse. So although they had white friends, they were going to be forced out. I went way too fast there. Okay. .25% of the Choctaws had died en route, so a great loss of life with the Native Americans. So this kind of shows the Trail of Tears. You can see from Georgia going up through the southern part of Illinois, across the Mississippi River into the Oklahoma Territory. You can see the Seminoles were taken by sea. There was a horrible, horrible accident crossing the Mississippi where over 300 Choctaw were killed, were drowned. So, you know, this was a horrible, horrible, horrible cause of death for many Native Americans. This is how the Oklahoma Territory is going to be divided up. You can see the different tribes have different areas. And to this day, there's still a very large Indian reservation with casinos and so forth, although not near as much territory as they were promised to begin with. Black Hawk are in Illinois, and they are going to resist any kind of removal on lands west of the Lake Huron, and they are going to be crushed by U.S. troops. President Lincoln actually fought in this war, although he didn't see any action, didn't kill any Indians. But this Black Hawk War is going to last for a period of time, and another group of Native Americans will be crushed. The Seminole in Florida, they're also going to fight, and this is going to last a pretty good long time, about 8 years. And the famous chief, well, they have Cohihajo here, but Osceola was the guy who originally would guerrilla warfare, attack, go back into the swamps. And they were pretty successful for a while. 1,500 United States soldiers were killed by the Seminole before ultimately they captured Osceola and some of the other chiefs, and 4/5 of the Seminoles end up being moved to